So yesterday I went down to Cape Naturalist to take some photographs of the lighthouse down there. Now I've been down there before and there is a particular shot that I wanted to get, but this was just like one that I was mucking around with earlier. So it's all part of a video that I have created. If you go to my YouTube channel, you will find that video and you'll see where I was shooting this. So we've got two images. So I shot when it was overcast like this, and which is this image, and I shot when the sun came out. So what I do is I like to lock the camera down on a tripod on a particular scene and then wait for the light to change, and then I use those two images to blend the light between them. So what I'm going to do is I open those two images. They're both pretty much straight raw out of the camera. I'm going to hold down the shift key and click and drag that one onto that one. Now they won't be perfectly aligned, although they should be. They're fairly close, but the lighthouse actually does move a little bit. So what I do is I shift click on the background and select both those layers, and then I go up to edit and auto align layers. So I'm just going to do the auto projection, and that will then give me what I want. I hit F on the keyboard to get a full screen view, and Command Option 0 to go into 100%, and then I'm just going to turn this eye on this layer 1 on and off, and you'll be able to see that we are actually pretty well aligned now without any problems. Obviously the water will be different and the sky will be different, but it's just this light here that I'm interested in capturing. So let's select layer 1, and we're going to find out how good the select sky function is in Photoshop. So let's go up to, when layer 1 selected, go up to select sky. Let's see what it does, and it did an okay job, but not so good. Okay, let's just Command D to deselect that. Let's just try that on the layer 0. Just turn the eye off on that one. Let's see what it looks like, how good a job it does on that one. Select sky, and that's actually done a better job on that layer. So let's use that as our mask. I'm just going to invert that, Command Shift I or Control Shift I if you're on a PC, and I'm going to zoom in to look at that mask and make sure that we fix it up a little bit. Now the reason I select that, because I want the mask to be around the lighthouse, and the foreground. That's what I'll be using to brush the light in with. So I'm going to fix that up. So I'm going to go to L on the keyboard for the lasso tool, and I'm just going to go for the polygonal lasso, and I'm just going to click, and I'm going to try and trace that lighthouse as best I can. Now I'm just doing this for display purposes, so I'm going to be a little bit lazy boy on this one, but you get the general idea. Now if you're doing this yourself, you would probably want to do it a much better job than what I'm doing, but I'm just wanting to get a lot of that selected and clean up that edge. And I tend to work, little bits at a time. Just going to find this selection here and try and trace those lines. Now this is at 100%, so it's probably good enough, but sometimes for these more complicated areas I'll go in a little bit closer. So I'm just going to click here and draw a straight line up there. I am a little bit of a lazy boy. If you double click, you don't have to exactly line up the points to finish off that selection. You can just double click and it will draw a straight line to that nearest point. Now when you get to these curves, you're probably better off changing the lasso tool to like more freehand one. So if you hold down the shift and hit L and toggle through it, then you get to this one here, and I'm just going to try. Now I'm doing this on the trackpad on my laptop because I need to get my I can't record audio on my iMac for some reason, which is connected to my Wacom screen. So normally I would do this with the Wacom, but I've got a Cintiq screen, so I'm having to do this freehand with a finger and two fingers on the trackpad. So I'm being very inaccurate, but you get the general idea. You will do this much better than I will do it. And we'll just have a look at the houses here. Not too bad, not too shabby. Seems to be a bit of a halo above those. I don't know what that's from. Let's just fix that one up again. And let's go here. Let's get back to the Shift L to get back to the proper tool. Polygonal lasso, double click. Yeah, I don't know what that's all about. It's just, maybe because I've zoomed in so far, it's just showing that it probably was a little bit of camera movement because it was windy as hell that day. Okay, I'm reasonably happy with that. Now before I go losing that, I'm just going to go up to select, and I'm going to save the selection, and I'm just going to call it lighthouse, like that, and click OK. And then that way you know where we're at. I can then deselect that. I'm going to go back up here, select our layer 1, and I'm going to add a layer mask, and then I'm going to invert that, and then I'm going to go up to select, load selection, and I'm going to load the lighthouse selection that we created. So now I can go in there with my brush and brush that light back in that I want to have in the scene. So let's go B for brush. We need a white brush, so that's our foreground color. D is default, that'll set the foreground and background colors to black or white, and X will toggle between the two. So we want white as our foreground color. We've got a brush there. Going to use a 30% opacity, and I'm just going to brush over this area and just bring that light back that's through that space. And I'm pretty much going to use most of that light that's on the side of the hill there. And I'm just sort of building it up. I wanted to get it a feathered sort of look down towards the water there. And that's probably pretty good. Now go Command D to deselect, and let's zoom in and have a look at what we've got here. Is it a dog's breakfast? It's not too bad. That's 100%, and you can see the light's gone from flat and dull to a bit more interesting. Okie dokie. So now you're going, okay, well that's great, Christian, but actually it looks like there's some weird darkness built out there. I know why. Because when you select the sky, use the select sky in Photoshop, it doesn't do a completely opaque mask. It has this kind of bleeding stuff, which is typical. See how it's kind of got a bit of a weirdness going on there? That's just so typical of anything that Facebook does. It just doesn't do it quite right. So I'm going to have a quick look at my mask. If I go option, click on the mask, yeah, see, look at that. It's just this. It doesn't select it correctly. I would have been better off not using that. I would have been better off using channels and doing it that way. So now I'm going to have to work out what I'm going to do with that mask. So let's try this. Let's go to while we've got the mask selected. Let's go Command L, and we'll just see if we can darken this down here like that, bring the midpoint across. That's also affecting that, unfortunately. Okay, that's probably not the best way to do it. Let's cancel that. Maybe what I should do is use my brush tool and change the blend mode to overlay and have black as our foreground color. Reduce our size of our brush there, go to 100%, and then just here we go. We're just going to brush over here because we've got this brush set to overlay, and because we've got black as our foreground color, it's only going to affect mostly the dark areas. If you go over the white areas a little bit, it's not so bad. You can see, I think Photoshop tries to blend the edge between the two layers, and that wasn't so noticeable over there, but I'll just keep it there. Actually, that might make it more noticeable. Let's just leave that alone for a sec. If I hit white as my foreground color and go over the white, that will make that much brighter. Let's see what happens. It could be a total dog's breakfast. Thank you, Photoshop, we love you. Okay, let's go back, hit Option, click on the mask. Now we've still got some sort of halo there, so it's going to need a bit more refining, but you get the general idea. Now it's really odd. Thank you, Photoshop. But what we can do is we can actually just click on the mask again and just reduce the density a little bit, and that'll help blend the two scenes together a little bit more. Could cause an issue with the water in the foreground though. So let's just pull it back a little bit. Something like that. And if the worst comes to the worst, we can just get our white brush, black brush, with a low opacity, and just run over that a bit, and just reduce that severity. Anyway, it's starting to look a little bit better, but yeah, I would be very careful of using the select sky function in Photoshop. It's not all that great. Okay, let's look at what we've got here. Now, I've really done some bad things with this. I've actually taken this photograph on the piss. Basically, it's not straight, but I knew I was going to crop the foreground out, so when I was shooting this, I wasn't interested in what was in the foreground so much. It was more about hiding behind a sandhill because it was so windy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flatten that image, Command Shift E, and I'm just going to right mouse click in that layer 1 and just go flatten, take it back to a background layer. And then I'm going to zoom out a little bit, Command minus, and I'm going to go C for crop, and I've got a crop in here of 3 to 1.65. This is a ratio that I found in a book. There was a guy who did this book, and I really liked the ratio that he had of his photos, and I've decided to measure that and find out what the ratio was, and created that ratio for myself. So now I've just gone C for crop, and I've just twisted it, and I've got this thing actually looking straight, and I've also eliminated most of that foreground, which is what I wanted to get rid of in the first place because it wasn't that great. And I'll clean that up a little bit, maybe just come back to there, maybe a bit higher. Click return, and that's more the view that I was chasing. Now I will go hit J on the keyboard, and then just shift and click and just fix up that dodgy bit there, and there's a little dodgy bit there. I'll just fix it up as well. Okay, so we've got the two images blended together. We've got a bit of hero light, but it still needs a lot more drama. So I'm going to duplicate the photograph, Command J, and then I'm going to hit F on the keyboard again. Go up to image, apply image. I'm going to darken it down by using a red channel and multiplying the red channel here. Okay, click OK, and adding a layer mask to that, inverting it, hitting G on the keyboard to bring up a gradient tool. Make sure you got this one selected. It's black to white. Hold down the Shift key and click and drag. Oopsie, wrong way. Click and drag the other way. Click and drag up, and it'll just give us a bit of a darker graduation on the sky. I probably need to go over that again and make that a little bit more interesting and a little bit more dramatic. Okie dokie. So if we wanted to do it differently, let's do it differently. Okay, let's if you want to erase everything you've done on your mask, instead of having to go back and erase it all, you just hit Option Delete and it'll fill it with the foreground colour that you've got selected. So that's basically hidden the effect. If I go Command I, all the effect comes back, and this time we're just going to use a brush, B for brush, with 30% opacity, make the brush a bit bigger, and we're just going to bring that light through here and brush it through, click and drag, and for some reason my mask isn't working. I still had my brush on overlay. Let's take it back to normal. Okay, shift click, because I wanted the foreground to be a bit dark as well. So we've got this coming through, and that's just, then I just tend to kind of follow a non-specific, let's see, random way of doing things. Don't want that to be too dark there. Reduce the size of the brush a bit, and then make sure at 100% we've got all that cool stuff along the horizon there. So if we turn that on and off, you can see we've just darkened things down a little bit, help bringing our eye into it a little bit more. I might add another adjustment now. Let's go back to, let's have a look at our levels. I can see there's a whole lot of white that could be brought into this image. Now if I hold down the Option key and click on that white point, drag that across to the left, you can see the lighthouse is starting to blow out. So that's okay, we can fix that up pretty easily. But we've got that effect on, the lighthouse is blown out, but let's just invert that, Command I, and then B for brush again, and X on the keyboard to change our foreground colour to white. And we're just going to shift click through here a bit more, just to add a bit more hero light through that section there. And see, that's gone a bit dodgy. I'm feeling a bit dodgy. I'm changing the opacity down to 10% and just blending that across a bit. So let's see what that looks like. That's better, just stops that foreground looking, sorry, the midground looking a little bit dodgy. And we'll go in and have a look at our lighthouse and just make sure that we haven't blown out the details, and we have a little bit, I can see there. So just going to click back on the mask, hit X on the keyboard, reduce our brush size down. Might hit W on the keyboard first, and then just quickly select the background, and then just quickly make a selection on that lighthouse there, like so. Doesn't have to be too accurate. Then we go back to this mask and B for brush with X as, sorry, black as our foreground color, and then 100% opacity, and then we can bring all that. We don't want to lose any of that detail in there. This is important stuff. Make sure you don't lose that detail. Command D to deselect, and just make sure there's nothing there that's been a problem. Okay, so now we should have just more light there, but the lighthouse is, I'm just going to go here a little bit, 10% brush, X, make that white, and just hit a little bit more there. It just seems to be, I might go over that lighthouse just a little bit. Okay, so we're sort of slowly getting there, starting to look a little bit nicer, but still not 100% what I want it to be. Okie dokie. Did I just hit something then? No. Alright, I'm going to look at the colour now. So if we go into selective colour and we work on these things, now I like my cyans to be nice and cyan, but I also like to sometimes take a bit of the yellow out of the blues, and then looking at the magenta, taking a bit of the magenta out as well, maybe a bit more cyan there, and then also at our yellows, if we take some cyan out of the yellows, they'll become more orange. If we mess with the magenta, that will take away that orangeness, and if a bit more yellow, we'll make it a bit more yellow. You can do a similar thing with the reds. Take the cyan out and red and magenta out and a bit more yellow in. So you kind of get that nice kind of teal and orangey sort of look from that. Now let's just turn that on and off. Takes a bit of the greyness out of the sky as well. Makes it a little bit bluer and nice. But I'm noticing this point here, which is a little bit too blue. There's some weirdness going on there. Let's turn that on and off. So what I might do is make sure the mask's selected. X on the keyboard to get a black brush, and I'm just with a 20% opacity. I'm just going to hit that a couple of times and just see if I can't take that bit out. It's a little bit better there. So if we hold down the shift key and click on the mask, we can disable the mask. You can see that blue is just fixed it a little bit. It's still something not quite right about that sky. I think it needs a little bit more stuff. So I think what I might do now is a curve adjustment layer. I'm going to select the hand and I'm going to grab one of these greys and I'm just going to pull that down like that, and maybe just pull that outside section there just to reduce some of the saturation. And I am going to hit G for the gradient tool, and I'm just going to drag up, and it's pretty much just to darken that sky down a little bit like that. We can also change the blend mode from normal down to luminosity, and that will take away a bit of the saturation as well. I'm still concerned about that patch there. There's this weird patch. It almost looks like it needs to be lightened a bit. So let's just try a curve with a blend mode of screen. Invert the mask. B for brush. White is our foreground color. X on the keyboard. 10% opacity, and let's just see if that can deal with that. It's just not my favorite bit of cloud. There's something weird about it. Anyway, all of it's looking a bit weird at the moment. Wow, that could be a bit nasty. Okay, so it's too strong. Drop it back with the opacity. Just pull it back a little bit. It's more about the color, isn't it? That's in there. So maybe if we go back to our hue saturation, click the hand, click on those blues there, drop them back a bit, like so. Then invert it, and using a low opacity brush again, 10%, we can just try and brush some of that color out of there. Now it looks like it's going a little bit. I think there is actually an issue with that. There's a bit of magenta in there that's appearing, but yeah, these are the things we have to do with these images. We have to keep working and working them until we get something that we're happy with. So let's go back and check out our before and after. Let's see where we're at. So option, click on the eye on the background layer. That's where we started. That's where we are now. So you can see how the light has changed. We're directing our attention to the lighthouse itself, which is what we want to do. If at any stage you want to go back on any of these layers, you can, and lighten up the foreground, stuff like that. Now let's have a look what it's like if we have a border and a command option C. I always do this, and let's make a little 4-inch border around the image, and then hit F on the keyboard, command 0 to get a full screen. So I like to do this. I like to sit back and just look at what I've done and make sure it's going in the direction. And it seems to be nice when you have a little border around it. It just helps you visualize what it could look like if it's printed. Yeah, it's not too bad. It's kind of the vision I had, not the best I've ever done, but it's getting there. Let's just flatten that down. Now, some people say you should never flatten your images. I always flatten because I'm just, if I stuff up that badly, I'll just go back and start again. But, that's just the way I do it. There's a great bit of software I've got called Shape, and this is the best thing I've found for mid-tone contrast. So if you click on Global, you can see the mid-tone contrast it puts in there. Like that really is quite strong, but I haven't found that it introduces any really major halos. So it's a really cool program for this. So if you are looking to do mid-tone contrast, this is the one to get. I don't think it's anything better at the moment, but that's a little bit hot. So I'm just going to pull that back to say 50% opacity, and then just have a look again. Then looking better, something like 50 is a bit better. So it just gives it a bit of a crispiness to it. Flatten that off, and if we want to get real tricksy, I've got this one called Visualizer. This is a great little plugin, and let's think about maybe getting a little bit of dramatic light coming from the side. So let's find some dramatic light. Nothing too strong, but this one looks pretty good. Let's hit the add button. So Visualizer is another great plugin to get if you want to do things a bit more easily. And it has all these different elements that you can put in your images. Okay, so that's applied now, so you can see there it is there, and obviously it's facing the wrong direction. Command T, and we can then just right mouse click inside there and go flip horizontal, and then we can just drag it and we can rotate it a little bit. That light was coming kind of on a from probably about that direction. Let's hit return. It's a little bit you can see how it kind of just brightens things up there in that corner, which is kind of nice, but you've got to be mindful that it's actually kind of hard, so you want to, let's get that like that. The sun was coming from about there somewhere. You want to then go up to filter while it's selected, and blur and Gaussian blur, and just blur it out a bit so it's not so, that's way too much. So it's there but not too noticeable. Something like that. And let's have a look. So with it, without it. You can also hit Command T and transform it any way you want. Let's make it a little bit more like coming somewhere like that, and it might look better in some places than others. Hit return. You see that when you're doing that, when you're making the changes, when you're transforming it, it goes back to the state before it was blurred. That's why it looked kind of sharp and harsh all of a sudden. But that's kind of okay. I think I can get away with that. See, it takes that dark bit of horrible blue, and all of a sudden we've got this kind of nice God's ray coming down, which wasn't there. You can duplicate that and make it more intense. Let's look at our saturation here. Let's go hue saturation. Just work on this grass a little bit. Just give it a little bit more of a tickle. I quite like that. And let's turn that on and off. Yeah, I don't mind that. Again, we'll put our little border around. Command Option C will help you do that. F on the keyboard to get the black view, and then zoom out. I reckon that's looking pretty good, and it's pretty close to the vision I had. Let's Option click on the background. Oh, actually I've flattened it, haven't I? Well, what we can do, now this is a bit of a fudge and it's not going to work perfectly. Let's go to our history. So let's go back to our canvas, get rid of that, do a snapshot, and then go right to the top and go before and after. So you can see it was crooked and it wasn't the right ratio that I wanted, and now it's super cool. Alright, it's not too bad. I mean, it's not the best thing I've ever done, but I'm happy. Let's save it before I lose that. Yeah, good enough for Instagram, and we're gonna call it, click and drag, Cape Leeuwin 0001L. Easy. It's going to be a TIFF, and I'm going to click OK. And I reckon that's just about good enough. Now I'd go in there and spot that a little bit, muck around, zoom in, make sure that I haven't got any errors with any of the masking and stuff. I haven't forgotten anything, clean it all up, and it will be done. Well, I hope you enjoyed that.